And we are live and we are back. Let's go. I'm Cory, your host, one half of the Quarter Full of Fat podcast, and I'm back like I never left with another installment of Wealth Wednesdays here on the Quarter Full of Fat podcast. We discuss health and wealth, finance and fitness, and everything in between. And we want to make sure you save more and save less and keep making better your best. Yes, yes. However, when my co-host Jordan went on paternity leave, I started these Wealth Wednesdays where I get straight to the finance information, no filler in between. And I know y'all see the topic of today's video. We're gonna get to them interest rate hikes. All right, highest in 22 years. But before we get started, y'all know what to do. Hit that like button, share, and subscribe. Shout out to the YouTube algorithm. Please leave those rating reviews on the podcast platforms as well. My information, as well as my co-host Jordan's information, is in the show notes. Jordan is Stop Stalling J, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Why do I still keep saying TikTok? When's the last time? I don't know if Jordan's even ever posted on TikTok. His business page is FinallyFit06 on Instagram, FinallyFit Facebook, website is FinallyFit.live. You guys need to check out FinallyFit.live so you can sign up for the Monday and Wednesday virtual classes, 5:30 a.m. on both days. Then myself, sideline_Cory, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Again, all this information is in the show notes. Now, I did want to say, shout out to student loans. I did want to say, the baby's on the way. My son is not here yet, and he's already messing up the sleep schedule. So this might not drop on a Wednesday. This might drop on a Thursday because it's 9:30 p.m. Regardless, we are still working and turning things out. Now, before we go on these interest rate hikes and see what that article is talking about, student loans, as we always talk about. Again, it's August. This is the last month. March 2020 is when the forbearance started as far as no interest. It has lasted all the way until August 2023. All right, what is that? What's March to August? 5 months. 41 months. No interest. This is the last month. Please start getting your information together as far as what you need to do to make your payment if you're going to choose all these various forms of not making payments, forbearance, or income-driven repayment, all these different options. Whatever you're going to do, please go ahead and get it situated because before you know it, student loans are going to start back up. All right. And before we get started, this is for entertainment purposes only. Don't sue me, sue your mama. Myself, nor Jordan are fitness or finance professionals, and everything you hear on here is for entertainment purposes only. And you need to do your own research and seek out a professional before taking any action. And again, this is a late night live stream. I'm crazy tired, but look, we gotta stay consistent. So if I'm fumbling and stumbling over my words, who cares? All right, y'all know what's going on. The interest rates is high as hell. They keep raising them. All right, and we're gonna go to good old faithful. We're going back to CNBC. Let me go ahead and get the screen share real quick. Here we go. Here we go. All righty. Let me see how that looks. Oh, here we go. Look at this ad. Fed approves hike that takes interest rates to highest level in more than 22 years. So 22 years ago, I guess it'd be 2001, right? So coming right off the dot-com bubble, right around probably 9/11. And this is by Jeff Cox. All right, key points. Fed Reserve approved a much anticipated interest rate. The Fed already said they're going to keep raising interest rates until they get a handle on inflation. So don't be surprised if you just keep seeing interest rates go up and up and up. All right, and this benchmark borrowing costs to their highest. Much anticipated interest rate hike that takes benchmark borrowing costs to their highest level in over 22 years. It was a quarter percentage, so 0.25. When you see that interest rate hike is based off of 1%, so it's a quarter of a percentage. It was raised. We'll bring the funds right. It went from 5.25% to 5.5%. All right, policymakers indicate at the June meeting that 2 rate hikes are coming this year. So I'm guessing this is one of the 2. Markets are pricing in a better than even chance that there won't be any more moves this year. All right. Then Chairman Jerome Powell said, that the central bank will make data-driven decisions on a meeting-by-meeting basis. All right, let's see. Washington, I guess it's Washington, D.C. The Federal Reserve Wednesday of last week, made the much anticipated, okay, same since we are. All right, anyways, in a move that financial markets had completely priced in, the central bank's Federal Open Market Committee raised its funds by 0.25%. Okay, again, like I said, taken from 5.25 to 5.5. The midpoint of that target range would be the highest level for the benchmark since early 2001, so right before 9/11. All right, here we go. Okay, markets were anticipating this. Again, Chairman Powell made it very clear these rates is getting hiked. These rates are going to continue to increase until otherwise noted. All right, so just be aware of that. So when it comes to something like interest rates from a mortgage standpoint, is there going to be a housing crash? Can't predict crashes, the market, yada yada yada. But what you can kind of predict, something in my eye, is the fact that as these interest rates continue to increase from a Fed standpoint, more hikes, it's like you're going to see the interest rates from a mortgage standpoint, other interest rates continue to increase. In short, the Fed increase in these interest rates makes it more expensive to borrow money from them. Thus, trickles down to you as a consumer from the bank. I should have that right. I don't know. My brain's probably already turned off. Anyways, that hike could be the last before Fed officials take a break to watch how the previous increases are impacting economic conditions. This is funny. So they're just raising the rates and sort of sitting back like they're doing a study. Independent and dependent variables. Oh my goodness. While policymakers indicate at the June meeting that the two rate raises are coming this year, markets have been already there. So the market has been preparing for this. Is when they're saying they're pricing it in. They just been preparing for it as far as from a pricing standpoint. All right, again, news conference. Chairman Jerome Powell said inflation has somewhat moderated, somewhat since the middle of last year, but hitting the Fed's 2%. Let me see what interest rate. Inflation. Excuse me. I think inflation is still around 5%. I believe. It's saying it's 3%. Almost that too. All right, but I mean, you still got a ways to go. The whole percent to go down. All right, they have a long way to go, says Chairman Powell. Still, he's seen to leave room potentially hold rates steady at the Fed's next September meeting. My guess is it'll be some time. Especially, I think one thing they're waiting for is these student loans to kick back on to see how that impacts consumer spending. But it's like going to be some time before we see rates decrease. They might decrease it, a consistent decrease. They might decrease it every now and then, once a year, something like that, where we're seeing quarter over quarter or meeting over meeting decrease. I think it'll be some time before we see that from economic standpoint. I would say it's certainly possible that we will raise funds again at the September meeting if the data warrants it. And again, like I said, I think regardless of in the data or not, I think one thing they do want to see is what, even though you won't be able to see it in September, but what happens when these student loans do kick back on and how that impacts people. Not that it's going to impact inflation, but it is going to impact people's spending power. So you're adding that payment back into their budget. And I'll also say it's possible that we would choose to hold steady and we're going to be making careful assessments, as I said, meeting by meeting. So he didn't. So you can either increase them, keep them where they're at, or decrease them. They didn't mention anything about decreasing. They might keep them where they're at or increase them, but decreasing them, not on the table. Powell said the FMC will be assessing the totality of the incoming data as well as implications for economic activity and inflation. Markets initially bounced. Okay, yeah. Following the meeting, but ended in mix. Okay, cool. Dow Jones, S&P 500 were barely changed. Wait, no. Dow Jones continued to streak, closing higher. S&P and NASDAQ were barely impacted. Treasury yields moved lower. One thing, too, for those of you who are big into the HYSAs or the high yield savings accounts, they are continuing to raise these interest rates on these savings accounts. It is insane. I think Allies now, no sponsorship. I think is it 4.5? They sent out an email. Let me check to see what Ally raised interest rates. And Ally doesn't have the highest one. But I know they sent me out an alert. They keep sending alerts talking about, hey, your interest rate has increased again. There we go. We're back with this is on July 31st, a couple days ago. Your savings account rate is changing. Went from oh my bad, it's at 4.25% now. It's crazy. Crazy. Guaranteed 4.25% on interest. Essence, I mean on interest. Yeah, on your interest. It's crazy. Crazy. Excuse me. It's time for the Fed to give the economy time to absorb the impact of the past. That is true. Continues raising and raising, said Joe Bruselas, U.S. chief economist at RSM. I agree with Joe. At some point in time, you keep raising if you want to, but you got to see what that rate hike is doing. You can't just tell that over a couple of months. With the Fed's last rate increase of 25 basis points now in the books, we think that improvement in the underlying pace of inflation, cooler job creation, and modest growth are creating the conditions where the Fed can effectively end its rate hike campaign. Now, again, it'll be interesting to see, as I mentioned, if ending the rate hike campaign involves decreasing or lowering the rates or just no longer increasing them, right? The post-meeting statement, they'll offer only a vague reference to, all right, the committee will continue to assess additional information and its implications for monetary policy. The statement said in a line that was tweaked from the previous month's communication that echoes a data-dependent approach as opposed to a set schedule that virtually all central bank officials have embraced in recent public statements. All right, hike. The hike received unanimous approval from voting committee members. The only other charge of note in this statement was an upgrade of economic growth to moderate from modest. I'm not sure if moderate. Okay, it's an upgrade. So the growth has been upgraded to a modest growth from moderate, which is a good thing. At the June meeting, despite expectations for at least a mild recession ahead, shout out to the statement again described inflation as elevated and job gains as robust. I thought we were technically in a recession last year, but the National Bureau of Economic Research, I believe, who declares it, didn't declare it. Are we in a recession or not? Cool. Will something like the student loans cause a recession? They probably won't directly cause a recession, but it'll be interesting to see again what happens once these student loans tick back on. All right. The increase is the 11th time the FOMC has raised rates in the tightening process that began March. They've increased it 11 times since March of 2022. That's crazy. The committee decided to skip the June meeting as it assessed the impact that the hikes have had. Since then, Powell said he still thinks inflation is too high, and in late June said he expected more restriction on monetary policy, a term that implies more rate increases. So monetary policy is just how they manage the money. Let me see. Let me get the better definition. The U.S. monetary policy comprises the Federal Reserve's right actions, communications to promote maximum employment. Yep. Okay, this is how the Fed's managing the money. Remember, monetary versus fiscal. All right. The Fed funds rate sets what banks charge each other for overnight lending. Again, like I said, the price, how much it costs to borrow this money. But it feeds through to many forms of consumer debt, such as mortgages, as I mentioned, credit cards, auto. Again, these are all the types of debt to many forms of consumer debt, such as mortgages, credit cards, auto, and personal loans. What other loans do you have? I guess not student loans, right? But I mean, these are all the type of loans that people have. The Fed has not been this aggressive with rate hikes since the early 1980s, where mortgage rates were in the double digits, well within the double digits, when it was also about an extraordinary high inflation and a sputtering economy. Yes, in the 80s, in short, I mean, this is 22 years, but a lot of the high inflation numbers that we've been seeing in the last year or so were the highest since the 80s. All right. News lately on the inflation front has been encouraging. The consumer price index rose 3% on 12-month basis in June after running at a 9.1% rate a year ago. Consumers also are getting more optimistic about where prices are headed, with the latest University of Michigan sentiment survey pointing to an outlook for a 3.4% pace in the coming year. However, CPI running at 4.8% rate. Okay, excluded food and energy. Okay. There's getting various numbers on what the CPI is, consumer price index. The Fed's preferred measure, the personal consumption expenditures, whatever. Price index rose 3.8% on the headline and 4.6% on core for May. So there are various consumer price indexes that can be looked at, and the Fed prefers to use this personal consumption one. Okay, all those figures, while well below the worst levels of the current cycle, are running above. Again, it's still not 2%. It's just saying. I mean, 2% is not that. It's only 2%, but it's over double of essentially of what it needs to be, right? I mean, 4% is double. Economic growth has been surprisingly resilient despite the rate hike. So the economy is doing better than what they think it should be doing, in short. Why is that? Good question. I mean, coming out this pandemic, it's going to be interesting to see what type of data we have in the next few years about how the pandemic truly impacted things. And it's still going to impact things for years to come. But it's crazy what the pandemic has done to not just our economy, but the global one. Second quarter GDP growth is tracking 2.4 annualized rate, according to Atlanta Fed. Many economists are still expecting a recession over the next 12 months. All right, so in a year, we should have a recession. But those predictions so far have proved at least premature. Oh my goodness. They keep picking out. If every month they just say it'll happen in the next year, eventually they'll be right. GDP rose 2% in the first quarter of this year, following a large upward revision to initial estimates. Let's see, right there. Employment also has held up remarkably well. Non-farm payrolls have expanded by nearly. That mean like non-farm is in like actual farm? Okay, whatever. By 1.7 million in 2023, and the employment rate in June was relatively benign. Unemployment is at 3.6, and that's one of the things. A good marker for a recession is usually the unemployment rate. Okay, same level as a year ago. So unemployment is still pretty low. It has been my view consistently that we will be able to achieve inflation. I guess it's Chairman Powell. They'll be able to achieve inflation moving back down to our target without the kind of really significant downturn that results in high levels of job losses. Excuse me. Inflation. Unemployment is pretty low. So I mean, if we see an increase in unemployment, I mean, it can't pretty much get that much lower. So I mean, if we see an increase of job loss, and that kind of is what it is. Oh, shout out to Disney if you see what's going on in Disney from a business standpoint. Shout out to ESPN. ESPN's going through job losses. They firing everybody. I've never seen this level of firing before, but they just letting everybody go. Okay, along as we end out the article. Along with the rate hike, the committee indicated it will continue to cut the bond holdings on its balance sheet, which peaked at $9 trillion before the Fed began its quantitative tightening efforts. The balance sheet is now at $8.32 trillion, as the Fed has allowed up to $95 billion in a month in maturing bond proceeds to roll off. All right, y'all. That's it again. Quick article. We're talking about the Fed rate hikes. This is something again. Fed approves hike that takes interest rates to highest level in more than 22 years. And again, this is by Jeff Cox. Interest rates, they are important because it does impact the economy. But at the end of the day, if you're in a situation where you're not big on the debt, right? You're not taking out a lot of debt or any debt, you're working on paying off your debt. It really kind of doesn't matter. I mean, like me sitting here, interest rates, I mean, they've been going up, no impact directly now. They indirectly might impact something like, food, inflation, things like that. But when interest rates increase from a Fed standpoint, usually people are going to complain about, oh no, it's going to be more expensive / higher interest rates when you get something like a mortgage, other type of debt. But if you don't operate like that, which is a general recommendation, where if you have that, you're aggressively paying off, and you're not going back into it, then when these rate hikes happen, it's sort of like imagine something. I mean, no one has ever bought everything, right? Terrible example here, but you don't feel the price of whatever it is, something that you don't buy when it increases, because you don't purchase it. So if you're not in a situation where you're operating or using debt to fund your lifestyle, the fact that interest rates increase are going to impact you, like literally at all, from that, a direct impact standpoint. So that's something to be aware of when you do see these interest rate hikes. and things like that. Obviously, if you're in the market of getting a mortgage, this is extremely important to you. Mortgage rates are likely going to increase. Again, I mean, they said they're going to see what happens in September. They had this meeting in June, but it's going to be interesting to see again how things unfold through the back half of the year. I don't know if every panorama restriction is gone, but we've seen foreclosures and things like that go up. One note on that is things are going up, but they're going to, you want to listen to if they're saying they're going back to their pre-pandemic levels, right? A lot of things decreased during the pandemic, which was, right off those 2 or 3 years. So when we see maybe an increase, it may, yes, truly be increasing, but it's just going back to what it was. And so that's why I said it's going to be interesting the next 5 to 10 years when we have, this pandemic data and we truly solidify when the panorama happened. Is it 2020 to 2022? How much of 2023, do you count in the panorama? But once we have that data and we get to see, we just see this, a crazy drop or a crazy spike, depending on what the data reflects, kind of just wipe that off. And we see a lot of the fear mongering going off right now. Yes, repos, foreclosures, things like that are up, but they're not up. They're just going back to where they were. I can't say it in every case, but in general. All right, so those things to be aware of when you're seeing these headlines coming out. It's August, and August means, as Drake said, I'm not going to say that line from Lord knows, but holiday season is slowly but surely approaching. So I talked about making your student loan payments. If you haven't already, start getting your Christmas list together. For those you don't have no debt. If you have debt and you celebrate Christmas still, as far as a purchasing standpoint, you're going to do what you want to do. But again, don't let Christmas just sneak up on you. The holiday season just sneak up on you. Step back to school time as well. I believe all the kids are officially going back to school now, as far as actually being in the classroom. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. It's going to all be here before you know it. So please start preparing if you haven't already. All right, y'all. That's it. Again, quick episode. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, reach out to myself or my co-host Jordan, and make sure that like button, share, and subscribe. Shout out to the YouTube algorithm and those rating reviews on the podcast platforms as well. Again, I'm _Cory. My co-host Jordan is Stop Stalling J, and his business page is FinallyFit06 on Instagram. All right, y'all. That's it. Again, leave comments. Let us know what you think. If you have any topics that you want myself and or Jordan to discuss, please just let us know. And I'm going to start recording some videos, so they might not be articles. So when it is time, my son does come here, I may or may not be recording, depending on how tired I am or am not, right? So I'm going to have some videos queued up to go. So when you see those and they're like, they're late as far as, they're old from a video standpoint, if I do articles, or I think I'm going to do more like this general topic, start discussing things that aren't relative to articles from like a date time standpoint. So it doesn't matter when it's released. So I also have those queued up for y'all. But all right, y'all, that's it. Again, any questions, comments, concerns, please let us know. So remember to save more and say less. Keep making better your best. And I'll catch y'all in the next one.